Okay, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you so much for being with us today in a new Process Professor session. I'm really happy to be with you today. We have a really excited topic to cover today, and I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned a lot about what we will be talking today. And let's start in this moment. So my name is Kevin Guerrero. I am the Technical Marketing Manager, and I am also the AK, the Process Professor. If this is the first time that actually you're joining our Process Professor session, the first thing that I want to say is thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your interest. And thank you so much for being with us in this session. If it is the first time, I want to explain you a little bit and give you a little background of how actually this whole Process Professor session works, what is the main objective, and what kind of thing you will be able to actually take from us and the advantage that you are going to take. So the Process Professor session, it is one program that we create and that we launch at the beginning of this year. And the main idea, the main objective, the main proposals that we can offer to our customers, to our partners, to our community in general, to anyone that is interested to learn or to know a little bit more about our platform, one space that is going to be completely free, where you will be able to hear from an expert some topics about how we are seeing the market, some topics about the product itself, some topics about best practices or new features that are in the product, and that you can learn about it and take all the information to your place, right? The way on how the Process Professor works in general, it's something like this. So we're going to have always some time at the beginning where we will be able to cover or to talk about one general topic. Usually after this, what we're going to have is that we will demonstrate or we will show you something within the product on how actually it's something, some features or some options that we have within the product that is related with the topic that we talk at the beginning. And then at the end, you are going to have a free space or some free time where you will be able to talk about or to questions or to ask whatever you want about our platform. Something really important about the last section or the last piece of our Process Professor session is that you can use that time to ask for absolutely any topic that you got in Visagi. It means it doesn't have to be related with the topic that we're covering. It doesn't have to be related specifically with just one product. If you have a question about reports, if you have a question about process diagrams, if you have a question about BPM, if you have a question about connectors, whatever you have, you can use that time to actually make your questions, and I will be more than happy to help you with everything that you got over there, okay? Today, we're going to have a new session on the Process Professor. Remember that our Process Professor sessions is something that is happening every second Thursday of the month. It's completely free. If you don't have the option, or if for any reason you are not able to check or connect on the live session, remember that in our Process Professor page, we are adding all the recording sessions, all the previous sessions in that page. So if at any moment you want to go, you want to review, or you want to see again or watch again one of those sessions, you can go there and you will find all the videos, okay? So what we have for today. Today, I have a really excited, I am really excited because the topic that we will be covering today, I'm sure that it will help you a lot. It will help a lot our community, and it's something that probably we haven't discussed in detail maybe before, and I hope that you like it and that you got it over here. And the first thing that we're going to have, or what we will be covering today, is basically a Visagi best practices roundup. So the main idea of this session is that I can give you some tips, some best practices, some advice, maybe some guidelines that we have identified internally in our company that can help you to actually take your projects into the next level, that can in some way help you to guarantee the success of your projects, right? We are going to do, or we are going to review those best practices, and the way on how I am going to do it is that I'm going to go from a really high level, right? It means just from the moment that we decide that we want to do a project of digital transformation, and then I'm going to go down and down until we get into some detailed best practices at the moment that you are working already with our tools, right? So best practices when you are creating your process diagrams, best practices when you are creating your forms, best practices when you are creating your expression. So what is going to happen, and please don't be afraid of that one, is that at the beginning, you are going to have really, really general topics, really general terms. And then once that we go down, we're going to go into some more maybe technical details if you want. Okay? So the topics or the main topics that I will be covering today is that I'm going to start with some best practices in terms of project planning. We have identified that some issues or some problems that we got when we're creating or when we're working with this kind of digital transformation projects start when we are in the project planning. So we will see a couple things there. Then I'm going to start talking about the multiple available resources that are for you when you decide to go to these implementations. Then I'm going to talk about into some general tips of implementation and tips in the documentations that you got over here. Okay, so relax, enjoy the session. At the end, you are going to have the time. If you have questions during the execution of the session, please remember that you have your question pool within the GoToWebinar. You can start typing all the questions that you got during the session, and at the end, I am going to be sure that I cover all of them. Okay, so let's start with what we have for today. So I would like to start first of all with one quote that I love it because it demonstrates how important it's today. Is right now everything that we're doing in terms of automation. Here, it is actually one quote that we got it from Gartner, and it's related with one new term that is getting a lot of attention in the market, that is the hyper-automation, right? And when we're talking about the hyper-automation, we're referring on how from the company perspective, I can take all those different elements that I got inside of the company and I can make them work together in an orchestrated and in a synchronous way, right? So if I have a bot, if I have an OCR, if I have web services, if I have legacy systems, if I have everything, how can I make that all of that works together and in an orchestrated way, in a simple way? That's why we are in Visagi, the one platform from every process that helps to orchestrate and to coordinate all of that. But take into account that one of the things that Gartner is saying about this is hyper-automation principles are the foundation for the future of work as it has rapidly shifted, please pay attention to this one, from an option to a condition of survival. So it means it's not anymore an option. It's not anymore like, okay, I think maybe I'm going to do it. No. It's something that you have to do if you want to survive in the market. And they stand that actually everything that can be automated will be automated. It means every single company is right now in a fast and quick race to try to automate everything as much as they can, as fast as they can. So this is great. This looks amazing. It's actually something that we got. But at the same time, we identified from McKinsey one study that was like, why do most transformation projects fail? And they identify that actually something close to the 70% of transformation projects fails. So what they say is, look, when you got 70% of transformation projects failing, the company needs a proven strategy to beat those odds. So I don't want to be part of that 70%. It's great. Yeah, I am in the same race. I am trying to automate as much as I can. But how can I get out? How can I be separated from that 70% and I can be one of that successful guys that I got on this point? So this whole session is all about that. So what can I do to have a successful project? How can I be 30% of the projects that actually are successful, that has a huge impact, that returns a huge ROI within the company? What can I do? So here is what we are going to have today, and it is a huge bag of presents with Visagi best practices. So I want to start, first of all, with some best practices from the point of view of project planning. So what happened? The success, right, or the failure of a project starts from the same moment that I decide to go for it. If from the same moment that I decide to go for it, I don't have a plan, I don't have any structure, I don't have any schema, I don't have completely clear ideas where I want to go, then it's going to be complicated that I am not going to be part of that 70% that probably is going to fail. So the first group of best practices that I want to give you right now for have a successful project implementation is start from the same moment that you got your project planning. And the first group of things that I want to talk about, and the first group of tips that I have is, look, as everything in life, we need to do project implementation and digital transformation in a step-by-step, right? We cannot predict that we're going to be completely successful if we jump right here into the biggest problem that we're having internally in the company. So one of the things that I wanted to say here is, hey, we have a huge opportunity to do these transformation projects in a successful way, but we need to do it correctly. We need to do it fine. We need to do it in the right path. And to do that, we need to just learn how to walk before to just go and run, right? So that's why my first best tip here, it is, guys, let's start small, let's think big, and let's scale fast, right? So it means let's do it step by step, but let's do it right. Let's do it in the correct order. Let's do it with the correct resources. Let's do it with all the knowledge that is required to do a step by step. So in order to do this, one of the best practices that we implement, and this is actually used in our company, it is one element, one methodology that is called the Visagi Spark methodology. The idea of this Spark methodology is that we have phases, different phases in project implementation, where I am able to do these 3 steps. Start small, think big, and then scale fast. So it means I am going to have one first phase that is going to be the energize one. Then I'm going to have another one that it will be the empower one. And finally, I am going to have something that is the expand one. So what is this? How we can use this in order to actually make our process successful. So this Spark, it is just one project management framework, right? That in some way provides some guidelines, some standards, and it combined with other frameworks to actually guide the project implementation of Visagi. So it means that we are using existing tools, information that is available already in the market, to guarantee that everything that we're doing actually go in the pace and in the moment that we want. Let me go in every single of these steps and let me explain you what are the main objectives of this one and how we can use this to actually be successful. So the first one is, okay, the first idea that I want is, okay, let's start small. It means let's energize. Let's have a quick start here. What is the main objective this one? Here, what we want to do is that we want to be part of your company. We want to jump into your company, and we want that everyone that is involved with this digital transformation project inside of the company actually believes on the tool. So some of the main objectives here is I want to build a momentum into the program. I want to gain the stakeholder buy-in. Everyone that is interested in this, they need to buy our idea. They need to see that we're able to deliver, that this is the best approach that they can have, and they need to instill the confidence in Visagi. So the main idea of this energized phase is that we're able to start from process automation, but be careful. We're not going to select the biggest and the complex processes right here. We're going to start in this energized phase with some processes that are giving a lot of pain within the company, but maybe are not the most complex ones. Why? Because the idea here is that in some weeks, between 7 to maybe 8 or 9 weeks, we can have a full development cycle where we can automate one of these processes and we can deliver it even to the whole organization. Even if you want to have another approach for the energized step or the energized phase, we can even have energized through our citizen developers. If this is the first time that you hear about this concept about citizen developers, I want to invite you to just go and look some of the previous videos of previous sessions on the Process Professor, where we talk and we discuss a lot about citizen developers. So the idea is that my citizen developers can also help me to do this energize. They can help me to automate processes in a really simple way, really quickly, with, for example, tools or features as live processes, right? Now, once that we are able to get here, to finish that phase, to actually make and demonstrating to everyone in the organization that this is working, that this is what we have, that the tool is exactly what they were waiting, and that what they were expecting, then we can move to the next phase. And this is going to be the empower phase. Here, the idea is that you are going to learn, or you are going to start the second phase with everything that you learned on the first one. Why? Because you already covered a whole implementation cycle. You already know how many resources and which type of resources do you need. You already learned from even some mistakes or some errors that you made on the past. You were able to actually create your groups, your teams. Okay, now I know that to do every single process automation, I am going to need one guy with some technical skills. I need maybe an architect, whatever it's needed. You already learned that one. And on this second phase, in this empower one, is where we are going to go for the big ones, for those big processes that are getting a lot of problems, that are complex, that has maybe multiple integrations, and now we got it. But why we're doing here? Because we already learned, because we already have a cycle, because we already were able to demonstrate that everything that we say and everything that the platform is saying that the platform is able to do, it can do it. And now we can just go for the big ones, right? And finally, the last phase of this one is what it is going to be called the expand. And what is the main idea here? So, hey, you know what? It's good. We were able to demonstrate at the beginning that we were able to deliver everything that we were asked. We were able to go for the big ones. We were able to automate, to improve times, to reduce reward, to reduce cycle times. And now I want this to be a continuous movement. So the way on how we will be able to do this one is to establish and create one concept that is basically the center of excellence, the COE. How I am going to be able internally in my organization to create a global shared service that help me to control, to centralize the coordination, to structure, and to have governance about the multiple processes that I want to automate. So the main idea of this third phase is that the automation is now part of your daily activities. That as you were able to demonstrate within your company and your organization that this is working, that now you have one team, one group of people constituted and defined as the COE, as the center of excellence, where they can receive all the possible requests that now we're getting from external areas, from external departments, and receive it, organize, prioritize, and then start having or continue having the automation movement all the time. We don't want that this process stops. We don't want that we automate 2, 3, 5 processes and then that's it. No. The idea, and remember what Gartner is saying, this is not anymore an option. This is a survival, right? And now what we want is we want to try to automate as much as we can. Everything that can be automated will be automated. So if we already got the movement, if everyone is believing in us, now let's establish something that allow me to continue actually automating our processes. So these are like the first big tips and best practices that we have here. Start with a good project planning. Take into account and review this. This is actually before, a long before that you start doing your first implementation, that you define your first start event on a diagram. No, a long before you need to do this a principle, that you need to establish these conditions and you need to have a good plan. If you don't have this good plan, probably you are going to be part of the 70%, okay? Now, let's suppose that you use this, right? Let's suppose that with the start small, think big, and scale fast with basically our Spark methodology, energize, empower, and expand, you have a plan. You have defined your processes and you're ready to just go for the implementation. So the second big tip is let's define or let's standardize the documentation of your processes. Something really important before that you start your implementation is that you have a proper and a good documentation of what you are going to automate. If you don't have completely clear, or if process owners or if the stakeholders of what you are going to do with your automation doesn't have completely clear what they want, probably you are going to have some problems in the middle. So our advice is go for it. Go for documentation. Create a space or multiple spaces where process owners and developers can have a common place where they can talk about, where they can discuss, where they can define precisely what are the things that they want, what they are expecting, and what are actually the requirements that we need to complete, right? Here, or for this one, we also have some advice, and we suggest, it's not that you have to do it, but we suggest it's something that it has been worked for us in a long time, and it's the way on how we are currently working. We suggest to have your documentation in two main sections. From one side, everything about the functional documentation, and from another place, everything about the technical documentation. So what's the meaning of this? In the functional documentation, I just want to go and sit down with the process owner and try to understand what he's expecting, what she wants in a screen, what kind of information I have to send for an assistant or to a system, what kind of things I am expecting from a general perspective in this process. And when I go to the technical documentation, what I want is now all the technical details. So how many integrations I'm going to have? I am going to have web services. That web service is going to be a REST, is going to be a SOAP. Which are the input? Which are the outputs? I'm going to have errors. What kind of integrations I'm going to do? Which legacy systems I am including? Which type of robots I am adding into my implementation? All of that must be defined and must be included in our documentation. Here, I have just some examples. Again, this is not something that you have to do it exactly in that way, but it's just one example where in technical specifications, we just go directly to everything. So which is the authentication option that I want to use? Which is the data model that I have? Which are the different entities that I want to use? For every single entity, which attributes I am going to use? I am going to have integrations. Which integrations do I have? Which is going to be vocabularies that maybe I'm going to use? I'm going to have, jobs. I'm going to have structures. All of this must go into the details, right? And from a functional perspective, what we're going to have is just some general idea. Which is the process? Which is the main objective? Which are the actors? Which is the process diagram? How many of these actors actually have some common task or some common work, right? How the forms are going to look like? Which is the information that I want to present? I am going to have some transitions in data between one part and the other. Which are the performance? All of this must be documented. And all of this must be accepted by all the ones that are involved in the build or in the construction of this document. This is going to be like the contract for the implementation. And this is going to be even if you are implementing it inside. If your own employees or inside of your company, you have your own developers, you have to do this because this is going to be the baseline to actually build and actually start all the implementation that you got, right? So we got start small, think big, scale fast, right? We got energize, empower, expand. And once that with that project plan, we define our processes, then go for the documentation. Now, I'm ready to start my implementation. So if I am going to start my implementation, what can I use? Which are the available resources that Visage is putting in to us and that we can use at any time for that. So what I want to do is, okay, this is going to be like a mantra. Read, learn, repeat. Read, learn, repeat. Every single time that you are in a project implementation, you will have to do this. Even if you are the most expert Visage developer, even if you have been doing process automation for multiple years, you must be open always to the read, learn, and repeat, right? So the idea here is, what can I do? What are the options that I have here? Which are the resources that are going to help me to do exactly what I want? And I'm going to show you some of them really quickly. First one, and probably one of the most common one of the most useful one, and I hope one of the ones that all of you know and has used it at least one time. The first one, it is everything about our user guides, right? Take into account that once that you are going to start your implementation, probably you are going to have questions. You don't know how to use, one particular feature in Visage or how to do something in Visage. So in our user guides, you are going to have absolutely all the information and documentation about all of that. You are going to have documentation for every single product of our platform, Visage Modeler, Visage Studio, and the Visage Automation. And for each of them, you are going to have a lot of detail on the implementation. You will be able to find from the most simplest and easy concept, right, as how to drag and drop an activity to a diagram, to the most complex ones, to how to automate or how to integrate with bots, or how to do a cluster, or how to include an external system to do authentication. You can go from the basics to the most complex one. So if at any point you got a problem, you got a question, you don't know how to tackle one situation that you're working, Visagi user guides are always available, always free. The second resource that we got over here, it is everything about e-learning, right? And one more time, the training department has been working a lot in all the years that they have been with us to provide for you a lot of training material. So they are going to be able to give you more than 15 free training courses where you can learn from any topic that you want. So again, do you want to learn how to create process items? There is a training for you. Do you want how to do integrations with RPA? There you have another one for you. Do you need to create a new widget or a connector? All of them are available for you. So all these trainings are free, are available, and you can consume and use it at any time. Remember that we have it in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, so you can use it in the language that it fits best for you, right? The third resource that we got over here is everything about our user forums. So take into account that our Visagi community is growing constantly, and we have a space for those communities. We have one space exclusive for Visagi Studio and Visagi Automation, and we have one space for the Visagi Modeler. In these forums, you have the opportunity to post ideas, problems, questions, or even to just say thank you to someone that helped you over here. The idea is that here, as a community, we can help between each other. So if I have a question and someone in New Zealand know the answer, that they can provide the answer to me, and we can build this community. So again, this is another great space that you can use in case that you are having any issue or any problem. And all of this is completely free. And finally, the last resource that I got over here, it is basically our knowledge base. So the knowledge base is the place where at any point, if you got an error, if you got a problem, if there has been something that for any reason you are experienced with your project implementation and you don't know what to do or what to tackle here, you can come here and pose any question or comment that you got over here. We have internal Visagi resources, taking a look to here, checking what is over there, what kind of questions we have received, and try to resolve all of this as fast as we can. Here, you are going to find not only existing and common errors and how to solve all those errors, but also a lot of how-tos. We receive a lot of things where maybe people doesn't know how to do something, and what we do over here on this space is to solve all those questions. So you got all these resources completely free, completely available all the time, okay? So again, let's review really quickly where we are. So we have our project planning, start small, think big, and scale fast, right? We already defined the processes that we want to automate. We already document those processes, and now we have review and check all the available resources that are for me. So now we are ready to go for our implementation. And the first big tip or the first best practice that I can give you when you are going to do your implementation is, before of all of that, please define naming conventions, right? What we want to do with this and what we have to keep in our minds is that we want that the project that we're going to do is something that we don't want to keep it small. Remember, start small, think big, scale fast. So we need to keep in our mind that what we have to do or what we want to do is to have a big project that actually covers the whole organization. And when I start a project and I start the project just for my area, maybe it's easy to control the names, it's easy to control how I am going to call my processes or what are the entities that I'm going to define. But when these start getting grow, and I am not anymore just dealing with 4 or 5 people, but now I am having 20 or 100 or 200 or 300 people around the world working in the same project. If I don't have a naming convention, this can be a nightmare later. So our advice here is, please, before that you start your implementation, define naming conventions for the elements that you consider that are necessary. Here are some examples, some of the most common elements where we define naming conventions. It doesn't mean that are just this one. You can define for all of you or for all the elements that you consider important. But here we suggest, hey, define naming convention for your processes. How are you going to call your activities? How are you going to name your entities? Are you going to define any specific standard for your attributes, for your relationships? What about the expressions? What about the case numbers? What about, forms? What about everything that you are going to create? And what we suggest here is you can define any standard that you want, but it is clear, or it is important that everyone have that one clear. Even if it's right now, you are already in the middle of the process of a project and you don't have this defined, it's fine. You can do it right now. Or you can go to your project manager and say, hey, you know what? I think it's a good idea to define naming conventions. And here are some examples. So we say, hey, you know what? For example, if I am going to create multiple processes, I want to define as a standard that all the processes that I am going to create will have this naming convention. I'm going to put first a prefix. It can be whatever I want. It can be, HR, or it can be the name of my company, or it can be the location where I am, right? So it can be US or Germany, whatever you want. Then you are going to have the name of your process, and then you can have an internal code. That internal code can be a number, right? 100, 101. It can be some letters, whatever you want. But if you have an internal code for your processes, what it is important is that later you can use that internal code for everything related to that process. So it means if you are going to create a business rule in that process, then you are going to put 101 everywhere. What is the great advantage of this? That later, if for any reason you got an error, you got a problem, and you are checking the error message that you are getting, and you see error, whatever, 101, you know that this is related with that process. And it's going to be much easier for you to keep track of that and to actually even debug problems if in case that you have it. Now, define naming conventions for entities. How do you want to call your entities? We suggest that you put first maybe a type. So for example, if it's going to be a master, it's going to be parameter, it's going to be stakeholder, then maybe a prefix, and then the entity name. So it can be M, for example, as my prefix to represent master entities, and then M\client. And I know that is a master entity, call it client. The same for our attributes. We maybe suggest that as a best practice, you define the data type prefix. So if it is going to be a string, let's use the letter S. If it is a Boolean, let's put the B. If it is a currency, let's put C, and then the name of the attribute. So it will be S, for example, name. So I know that it's a string, that is going to be the name of that point. So define naming conventions. This is going to help you a lot, and you can define naming conventions for whatever you want. Okay? Now, as MacGyver, let's go with some implementation tips. So if I am already in the implementation of my project, if I already have all my, let's say, definition, if I already got everything clear from my perspective of the processes that I'm going to have on the energize phase, then the ones on the empower, then the ones on the expand, I already document all of that. I already got my definitions and naming conventions. I'm ready to just go directly, right, that you are going to get it into the implementation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you tips, right, from different execution points of our process, and then I'm going to show you how maybe some of them are going to look like when we go directly into our tool. So the first one, when we decide that we're ready to do our implementation, probably the first thing that I'm going to do is to create my process diagrams. And here I have a lot of tips and a lot of best practices for doing this. The main one, or the one that I think it summarizes everything, is please avoid process diagram in the spaghetti way, right? I don't want to have spaghetti process diagrams. I don't want to see this whole lines crossing which one other, and it's so hard to read, it's so hard to understand. I always say, when you are going to create a process diagram, try to think about or trying to design that process diagram, keeping in your mind that you are going to give that process diagram to your mom, to your nanny, to your dad, and that they must be able to read it and understand it. Why? Because a process diagram is not rocket science. It's something simple. It's something that you can read it. But if you make it difficult to read, no one is going to understand. Not your daddy, not your nanny, nor your mom, none the expert that is going to do the implementation. So here I have some tips or some options or some things on how they look like. So these kind of processes are the ones that you must avoid, right? And when you are going to create your process diagrams, I have a lot of tips here. In the same way as I told you that you can define naming conventions for your attributes, for your entities, here it is also a good idea to define naming conventions for the elements that you are going to create in your diagram. So what are the names that you're going to give to your activities, right? So we suggest that all your activities have a verb at the beginning. But if you don't want to use that, at least you must be consistent. Take a look what is happening here. I have one activity called create, another one say notify, another one say notify. But in the middle, I have another one that say notification and then authorization. So what I am going to do is going to be a verb or is not going to be a verb. At least I need to be consistent. I need to define clearly which type of lanes I am going to define. I'm going to include lanes that represent systems. I'm going to include areas. I'm going to include roles. What I want to include here. Every time that you are creating a process diagram, you must be careful that you always comply with the standard and with the validations defined by BPMN. Remember that all the process diagrams comply with this BPMN 2.0. This is the notation that we use. So for example, according to BPMN, having one element out of the pool, out of the container of the process is incorrect. So if I have this is not going to work. Be careful with the elements that you use even to connect other objects. So I am going to use this line, and is this line correct? It's actually good to have it. Be careful with the definition of the milestones, right? Remember that according to BPMN, I am going to use lanes that are this one as applicant, boss, and purchasing department to define the rules or the different actors in a process. And I am going to use milestones when I want to define phases of my process. So if you have clear or if you're able to identify phases of a process, it's going to give you a lot of additional information to know and to read in a much clearer and easy way how actually the process works. So I know that I have a phase that is when I'm going to do the request and another one when I am going to do the quotation, right? So the idea is that once that you are creating your diagram, you are so careful with these details, right? BPMN define a lot of conditions that we must comply to make our process diagrams correct. In our documentation, in our user guide, there is one article that explains you all of them. But also remember that always when you are creating your diagrams here, you got always this option called validate. And through the validate option, you will be able, or the system is going to help you to check if actually your diagram is correct or not. And if there is an error, that actually you can go and check where the error is happening, right? The advice here is that you can go from this type of diagrams to something much easier, much standard, much clear, where everything actually is being consistent. With all my activities having the same name, with all the lines completely correct, with no elements getting out of the diagram, with actually a endpoint with the result of each one. So I am going to be able that this is going to be when I got a purchase request rejected, or here is when I got a purchase request approved. So this is the first big thing in terms of that point. Now, the second one is going to cover a lot of things, but I think that these two things or these two words basically summarize and grab all the things that I want to say. And it is reduce and reuse. Try to reduce as much as you can the work that you are doing and try to reuse as much as you can elements that you already built, right? Just to give you an idea, and I'm going to tell you why I'm showing you this. Remember that when you are working in a Visagi project, you have different layers, you have different levels. The higher level possible, it is the project. That is where you got everything. But inside of one project, you can have multiple applications. And inside every single application, you can have multiple processes. So when I am talking about reduce and reuse, it's because I want that you remember that you can reuse a lot of elements in these different levels, in a process level, in an application level, or in a project level, to reduce your work. So every time that you are going to create any element that you got, it doesn't matter if it is a form, it doesn't matter if it is an expression, it doesn't matter if it is actually a condition. Whatever you are building or whatever you are creating here, remember or try to think about if there is some way on how you can reuse and reduce your work. Just to show you this, I want to go really quickly to our Visagi Studio and show you how that looks like. So remember that when you are in a project, this is the project that I have as an example, this is the structure that you got. You have your whole Visagi project, that is everything that you got here. You got your application, and then you got your processes. So if I want to create a form that I want to use it just in this process, then I have to go to the process and maybe create forms here, right? If I want to create a form that maybe I want to use it in multiple places, probably I don't want to create it here, but I want to create it in a different place. The same applies for expressions. So if I want to create an expression that I can only use it in this process, I should create it here. But if I want to have an expression that I can reuse it in other applications, I should create it here. And if I want to create an expression that I can use everywhere in my project, I should create it here. So every single time that you are creating any element in your project implementation, the idea is that you always think about how can you reduce your work by reusing elements that you already create. One really clear example about it is when you are creating your forms. So if I am creating my forms and I already identify and I have already clear which information I want to display in one of my screens, then at the moment that I am going to create that form, I need to identify if there is something from that form that I want to reuse later in this process or in other processes. And that is where you are going to find the reusable forms in Visagi. So that are these ones that has this blue lane called nested form and the blue border line. All of that makes it really easy then to accelerate your work. So you create a form one time and then you reuse it as many times as you want, right? In the same way of the forms, you can do the same situation when you are working with your expressions. So if you have an expression and you got one expression that you know and that you have completely clear that probably is not going to be only used here, but in multiple places, you can define it in a different level, in the process level, in the application level, or in the project level, and then reuse it. And in the same way as we define naming conventions for processes, for entities, for attributes, take a look that you can even define naming conventions for your expressions. What I am doing in every expression, I am doing a validation, I am doing an assign, I am going to do a general expression. And also, please be careful with this one. This is another best practice that you should use when you are creating even your expressions. In the same way that we are able to document our processes, please document your expression. This is a tip for developers. If you are doing a process automation and you create one expression, you must have completely clear and a standard on how that expression must be documented. I always say that you must be create expressions not by you, but by someone else. What is the meaning of this? Probably you are going to be the one that create the expression, but maybe you are not going to be the one that has to maintain that expression. So if you don't create, right, your expressions correctly, or if you don't define, for example, variables with meaningful names, or if you don't have these basic tools as documentation for expressions, no one is going to understand what you did. And probably at some point, someone is going to say, hey, you know what? It's better to start from scratch. So this is just one example. define things like the name of the expression, who was the author, when the expression was created, when it was last modified. What are you doing actually into this particular expression? What are the inputs that you got, and even which are the outputs that you got? So if you got this, again, you can reduce the time and you can reduce the work of someone that later must do maintenance of this particular point. So this principle that we got over here about reduce and reuse, it's something that I want that you keep on your mind all the times when you are creating your projects, when you are working in your processes. How can I create elements that I can reuse to later reduce the work that I am doing? Okay? This is my last tip, the last tip that I'm going to have it here for you.